Welcome to the Entrepreneurial Blueprint Podcast. Real people, real stories. Chasing dreams, overcoming obstacles. Come get inspired and take action. I know you're ready. Let's go.
Welcome back to the Entrepreneurial Blueprint. It has been quite a while since we've published our last video, but I didn't want to have any other guest on besides Michael Bresler. We've had really good episodes with him, a lot of good traffic, and it seems like our listeners really like the information you're bringing, Michael. So this is going to be nice to kick off our podcast campaign again. Michael, how's everything been by you?
I think it's been good. Yeah, I mean, people love the content, as you said. AI is a big buzzword in the world right now. There's a lot of opportunity with AI, but then as I'm working with different clients, doing different workshops, there's a kind of a mix of people who are really excited, and then also people who are scared, fearful, scared of the unknown. Some are, waiting for guidance, waiting for some input on how to use it, the value of using it. And so I think part of our job here is to try to bring the truth of what it is and to help people cut through the noise of the media, I'm not going to name the people, but the people out there who are on, maybe they own Twitter. And they just talk like, oh, everybody's going to lose their jobs, or, humanity is going to whatever, like we're going to Terminator. And so people, they believe those things. And so I think a lot of it is just, let's get to the crux of it and, how do you use it, the value. And I think a lot of it is really just, if we can talk through something applicable, right, that someone can actually leverage it and see value, it's really about just getting them to dip their toes and to start. And I think that's a lot of the challenge, is just get going, right? And I'm still, and we're still early because I'm still working with a lot of people who haven't set up an account in any AI tool, any ChatGPT, any Claude.
I actually just folded, and I'm paying for the premium ChatGPT, but it's worth it. I'll tell you that much. Before we jump into, I want to talk today about training, sales training, and how to automate that, how to make it easier, and how to actually maximize, your sales team's output by using AI. But you did bring up something interesting that I think is important to talk about. Obviously, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on in the world right now that we're not getting political. We're not going to talk about politics, but you go on, X, you go on Instagram, and AI can be a double-edged sword, and having to sift through that, especially if you're someone who's young, or if you're just want to go on X and just stream maybe some sports, but there's a lot of things that you don't know what's real and what's fake.
Yep.
Because AI is getting really advanced and really good at what it does. So, what is your advice, I guess, to the listeners of how to be careful right now, what you're seeing online, how to know what's real and what's fake?
Well, I think the first thing is to be really intentional about who you follow, right? Like, who are the sources that you believe are true and have shown truth? But then also being really thoughtful about not getting sucked into like echo chambers, because the way the algorithm works is when you start watching one type of video, you basically will see the same type of video, the same type of theme or content, right? And then you start thinking that the whole world is talking about this one thing in this one way, but you're really just kind of in a room, right? And so I think so some of it is just trying to stay neutral and partial to hear other ideas and different views. I think one of them is just, use your own brain to verify and to validate if this is actually true or not true. What I always do before I take it to heart, whether it's telling, texting my family, oh my God, did you see this? Or reposting, is I always verify. I always go out to Google, and then I always verify if that is something that is actually trending across. And I'm not saying that, CNN or MSNBC, that they're all, quote unquote truth. Everyone has their own truth. But it's just, if it's happening or it's happened and the big media outlets are picking up on it, then then maybe you could think. But I generally have tried actually not to repost anything that could be possibly seen as untruthful. Because what happens is, and we saw this, look, we both love baseball, right? I mean, we saw this with whether it was the incident at the Coldplay concert, or recently, like the Phillies Karen, as they call her.
Right.
I mean, it just went crazy. And it was insane because, people were like, oh my God, who's this person? And they were trying to do like reverse lookups on Google Images, and they found someone who looked like her. And then that person's posting like, it's not me. I'm not even a Phillies fan. I'm a Red Sox fan. I don't go to games. And it's like, who is it? I personally didn't really care. But it was all over the feed. You had to like just not go onto social to see that, right? And so like that's an example where the news, every single post was about someone who thought they found something. And then people were posting like fake emails or fake press releases from that person. And then people were commenting like, oh my God, how could that person say that? And it's like, did the person say that? How do we even know? How does the person even know that person is the real person? Like, we don't know. And so I think what we all have to do is just not like really try not to get on that bandwagon to try to build like that whole, like I guess in the old days, it's like the villager with the pitchforks.
Yeah, right.
It's like you see a couple of folks like that person's a witch, and then that you're going to go after them. So I think that's part of what we have to do is we have to be really thoughtful that before we start posting things that we look at stuff and we go like, and that happened to me. Like my own personal thing was I remember when I saw the Coldplay stuff, right? And to me, like the adultery cheating thing has always been like a problem. Not that I've experienced it, but just like someone who's very traditional around like marriage and different things. And so I remember like just seeing some of these quote unquote press releases. And one time I was going to repost it and I was like, wait a minute, like a CEO, a guy who's smart wouldn't say this. This doesn't make any sense. And it was fake.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about too. Yeah.
And the problem is what happens is, you trust. So first of all, you trust somebody. And so you see their repost and then you think it's real. Or the other concern with why we have to be really diligent about how we manage our own social media and what we talk about, what we text, is that we have also the risk of losing our own credibility.
Right.
I mean, people, I know people who I've unfollowed them on social media because I'm like, man, you repost like all these things and none of it is real. And so I can't believe anything you say anymore. So the one thing that you do say that is maybe real, I'm like, no, like you just repost. And it's kind of like it goes back in time. This is not a new problem. I remember my mother used to like forward me all these emails, like this scam, that scam, or like, oh, look, you could go get a free Apple phone. And it was like, it's not the Apple store. You know what I mean? And I'm like, stop forwarding stuff because it's not real. And I hope you're not signing up. Oh, I'm just trying to be helpful, but you're not because this isn't real. This is spam, right? Like, so social has kind of made it a little bit worse, but that's my suggestion is just, we've got to use our brains.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Trust but verify has become, I think, a bigger need in the world now.
Yeah. It's also sometimes just get off your phone, right? Like
it's another thing.
You don't need to be sitting and surfing on social media and stuff. Like go hang out with some friends. Or
I think that's that's a really critical piece of it, right? Is like try to get off of it, don't be on it so much, and then try to build like those real relationships with those real people who really resonate with you. Where you can have. So I think here's the thing. What we're really talking about here is this culture of consuming information, whether it's real or not, and then jumping on the bandwagon, right? But what we really need, and I think it actually applies really well to AI and where AI could help, or where AI could help us free up time to do this more, is what we really need is more about the relationships and the ability to like go out, grab a coffee or grab a beer and have a conversation with someone about something.
Right.
Because the way we do things now is I think it's become very divisive that people aren't able to have conversations with people who don't agree with them.
Right.
And I bring up the AI piece, so kind of going back to the AI is that, you mentioned in the beginning, working on sales scripts and things like that, right? So I think AI can do a lot to help with some of the thought partnership, internship type of work, to be able to free up time, right? So if you're working in sales and now you have AI help you craft a sales letter, you're the expert in sales, right? So AI is only going to be as good as you driving, understanding what your clients want, how to connect with the clients, understanding the demographic you're in, because CR3s it seems like every day there's a new city that you guys are announcing, right?
Yeah, that's the goal.
That's really awesome. But every city has its, as we all know, if we all live in different cities, every city has its own thing. Right. Like you're not going to talk to a Baltimore, customer, especially even like between Pike Swords, Towson, or Dundalk, right? Different type of customer. It's the same thing. Like I saw you guys are in Cleveland, right? I think recently. So
Yeah.
Ohio's a different world than Baltimore.
Yeah. No.
Texas is also, right? So it's about the human connection and the human figuring out what the message looked like.
Yeah. And so that's a great, I really like that transition point. Kind of the bad now to the good, because I do think a lot of these social media shorts could also be really good.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of great content. I mean, as you know, I'm sure we've talked a lot about this. I'm a hitting coach. I coach obviously your son. I coach a lot of other players in hitting. And, I could be just scrolling on Instagram and I follow a lot of hitting coaches, and the short 35-second reels of these hitting coaches talking about different things they're working through or different pieces of advice. And I look and that's a really good idea. And it sparks something in my head, right? And I don't have to sit on YouTube. I don't have to sit reading books. I don't have to sit watching baseball just to get that little piece of advice that could be really helpful. So, that's where the good comes into it. And, turning into at CR3, we have, not to brag, I think we have the best, sales team around. But obviously, there's tremendous sales teams all around the country with different roofing companies, whatever it may be. The one thing we have to do is keep up on the training, right? The sales training. Where can this technology come in to help automate these sales trainings?
Sure.
Not even just automate it, but kind of help a management team keep up with the times of what are the new sales training pieces, right? As you said, different people need different things when you're selling to them. So selling a roof to a new homeowner who's 30 is a lot different than selling a roof to their neighbor who's 73 years old, right? How can AI help with that, and how can you automate those trainings?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question. So before we jump into that, though, I just wanted to jump on your point real quick about watching hitting videos. So very similar to like watching videos on sales, right? So the value of those videos, whether it's a hitting coach video or a sales video, is that you are a hitting coach, right? Or an expert in sales, right? So I think the important piece there is that whatever content you receive, however you consume it, is only as good as the person who's receiving it able to apply to what they know. And that's why my son has a hitting coach like you, right? Because he could also go on Instagram and watch hitting, but the hitting coach doesn't know who he is, doesn't know anything about him, lefty, righty, power, not power, right? Like his like, his eye contact, how he works, right? And I know this because when I was starting coaching, I learned how to coach from YouTube videos. Right? And so like, I got better over 10 years, right? Won a championship. But in the beginning years, I was like the worst because I was trying to apply people telling me all these things and I didn't really know how to do it. I had to learn, right? So getting into the AI piece, and I think that's a really critical piece with AI as well, is, AI is going to can help you keep up, can help you do the trainings, and I'll explain how. But AI is also, like I said, is only as good as the sales guys, right? And so what that means is that the AI itself needs to have some training itself, needs to have some work itself to be able to align and to be able to really, be refined so it resembles, let's say, what CR3's ethos is, right? because the way AI has been trained, and when I'm talking about AI, we're talking about ChatGPT, Claude, really the large language models, because if you were to buy a software that is really a software geared for sales, using AI, they've trained that to have some of like the sales processes and like this some of the best practices for sales, right? But it may not always work for every organization.
Yeah.
So it's important just to understand that the way that AI is trained and continuously trained is, number one, by people using it, right? It's training off people's data, which is why we say, when you go into your ChatGPT, you should go into settings and turn off your sharing data for training, right? I think it's an important thing, just not to share everything you're putting in there. But the second thing is that, the large language models are being trained off of everything from like Reddit to Facebook, right? So you've got the sales guy who's trying to sell you that $1,000 subscription to learn how to sell, but that person has never really sold. They just know how to sell their own stuff, but they don't know how to actually sell, right? There's a lot of guys out there or girls out there who, they're selling, oh, this is how you grow a business, but did they ever grow a business? No, right? And so you have those kind of folks. Again, it's just what it is. And then you have the other side of it, which is you have people who, they wrote a book they built 5 businesses and this is how they did it. Now, I'm not saying one is better than the other, but the reality is that AI takes all of that and it knows everything, but it really knows nothing because it has no idea of how actually things should work in the world, right?
Right.
So kind of getting into the AI piece, I think there's two really interesting use cases on how to use AI technology. So the first one is what we were talking about before we started the podcast this morning, which is just how to train your AI, whether it's developing a GPT or a project within your paid version of ChatGPT, or doing the same thing in Claude. All the LLMs you can train, is being able to train it on CR3, giving it the website, being able to give it essentially everything from your company to your company culture to what are your missions and values of your company, really like what's your ethos, like what do you stand for, right? Because that essentially resonates and that's your foundation for everything that comes to your communications, right? Because that's what it is. I mean, if you think about any brand out there, right, what we need to do is essentially help AI understand what your brand is, right? And so that's the first part of it. And then it's leveraging AI once it understands that to become your thought partner, and then also become your smart intern, in the sense of being able to have a dialogue with the AI, to riff with the AI, to be able to share ideas, new ideas of how new sales processes or practices could work. But then just like a human being, right, you as the expert in sales will come up with a possible sales plan, maybe a sales script. But just like you would without AI, you would test out those sales scripts to see what is working, what is not working, right? And then you'd be able to take those results, because the key here is the feedback loop. Take the results and go back to your AI that you've been training to say, okay, so these are the 5 ideas you gave me. We tested all 5 of them. This one actually was really great. This one was okay. The last 3, like we got no sales. And here are all of our metrics, right? We did it within like a controlled community, let's say. We, like similar demographics, like, because this is about the sales process is also about testing, right? AI, just like a human, will only give you as many ideas as you can get. But just like any marketing message, any brand message, any advertisement, people are doing these A/B testing where they're testing like 2 different pieces. And so you might have 2 scripts, right? So the idea is that AI can exponentially help you come to these ideas, craft these scripts that really can be like really articulate, right? And the messaging can be really crisp, which is amazing. And then you can go and really quickly test those things with your human salespeople, right? And then based on some of those results, once you have like consistency, you can start testing the effectiveness of it, right? So really what AI can do is really 2 things, but you need the effectiveness to be able to make sure that AI really is successful, right? Because AI is seen right now as a lot of it is efficiency, right? So a lot of the work I do is efficiency, right? Providing operational excellence and efficiency, being able to make things go faster, right? But the reality is faster is not the only metric. Effectiveness is actually more important, right? So if you're using AI and you're developing sales scripts, right, it doesn't matter if you can develop a faster sales script if that sales script isn't effective. If it doesn't sell anything, right? Like
Right.
the point is the objective of what you're doing is to sell product, right, and to provide a great product to a customer. The objective is not, oh, we got a sales script faster to our sales team, right? So I think that's an important piece because a lot of times, and then I mention this because this is what I run into a lot, which is, the measure of success isn't like checking the box that you finish the task. It's that the task actually is effective.
Right.
Right. So like sending out a bunch of emails, the success is not, oh, look, CR3 just sent out 1,000 leads, right, to different roofing companies. That's not the success. The success is like, wow, we converted 80% of them.
Right.
Right. That's the success. And that's your measurement of success. So that's the number one, is using AI to streamline. So whether it's feeding AI some sales data, and we can get into another one, I think, around AI policy and guidance, because you mentioned, CR3, is paying for AI licenses, which is really good. And so I know we had this conversation before, but just around like the privacy confidentiality for those listening, where, if you're going to use a free license, just be cautious about uploading things that are personal, that are, confidential, things you consider private. Like don't upload your, roofing company's financial documents
Right.
into a free ChatGPT, right? But people, but again, AI is an interesting place. Like when you talk to an AI, or whether it's literally talk to or type, the reason why it's so interesting is because it gets more out of us than Google search, right? And it definitely gets more out of us than using like an Alexa or a Siri. So the second way that I think really sales could help, which, is coming out more and more now, right, is when you created your GPT and you've also then loaded in your sales, is being able to create essentially another GPT that would kind of have the brain of your salesperson, right? Or vice versa, the brain of your customer, right? And so what you can do with ChatGPT, with Claude, which is really so fun, especially when you're driving, is you can have a conversation with AI, right? And I don't mean, like the way text messages work where, you talk to it and it types it. I mean, you can, talk to your AI and AI will respond back and talk to you.
Right.
And so I see an opportunity, like I talked to some healthcare companies about this as well, which was like around training, right? And so one of the healthcare challenges, especially for doctors and nurses, is like, how do you deliver bad news? And so the practice has always been, well, the first time you do it, it sucks. The second time you do it, it sucks, because you're doing it with a person, an actual person, family. And at a certain point, like, okay, that's how I learned in business, right? Like, how do I give a client bad news?
Yeah.
You pick up the phone and you call them, and you're like, oh my God, I gotta get this over with. And then maybe you have hopefully your day's over, you have a beer because you're like, oh my God, this is horrible. And then by the time you get to my age, it's like a walk in the park. Like you get on a call and it's like, it happened. I know how to fix it. We're good, right? I'm not scared. And I think that's where, from a sales perspective, is about we need to use AI as an opportunity for the limbic learning, right? The limbic learning example is always like, firemen run into a building that's on fire in a controlled environment. And the reason why they do that is what they call limbic learning, which is that your brain starts to adjust to the realities around it, and so it can actually function in tough times. And so you don't put a fireman into a burning building, for the first time. You put them in a controlled environment because the brain will be able to start understanding like the breathing challenge. I'm not a fireman, but I've learned the limbic learning piece because in a lot of the stuff I've done, a lot of it was with talking with clients, is around just doing it over and over and over again. Like sales is the same way, right? Like you just got to like learn how to sell. And the way that I think exponentially move that forward is to leverage AI. So if you can build out your AI to be either it's your sales agent where you can be a customer, right? And you can kind of test what the sales responses should be to what you think a response should be, or vice versa, which I think is even better for sales folk, is to, be able to have a GPT that is your customer,
Right.
your typical customer, training them on the typical responses that you would actually get, and then having the salesperson talk to that AI to see if it could actually sell the AI on the roofing product.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, and I've noticed since I've started paying for the premium GBT, ChatGPT, that it has started to. It's almost like predicting what I'm going to ask before I even ask it. So I upload something and it says,
Right.
"Do you
Yeah.
want?"
So I mean, just for that, the free and the individually premium licenses, right? So those two essentially, they're the same, pretty much the same models. They'll both learn.
Yeah.
The only difference is that the paid version that you have just it's limitless, right? So it just can go so much more faster and learn so much more. The free version has some limits, and people get fairly frustrated pretty quickly when you start using it too much, because it'll basically tell you, kind of like, I mean, you're too young for this, but back in the day when we had these cell phones that we only had a certain number of minutes a month,
Mm-hmm.
it's the same thing. Like, it doesn't tell you how many minutes AI has left, but it's like, because you can't actually measure processing time, so to speak, in that world. It's hard, but but most people, like you, it's worth it to pay for it, because the fee is really not consequential at all to the value you can get, because you're going to save more than $25 a month in just using the tool.
Yeah.
The amount of time you save.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, so I think the learning, and I think that's the key, right? AI will keep learning. It'll keep learning about you, and as you use it, like your expertise, AI will pick up on to be able to start to think about some of your questions. And so some things too we could talk about in the next session possibly, which is some things you might want to also do is like personalize your AI account. You can go into customize, and you can basically put in some rules of how it should behave. And I can send that to you afterwards in email. But so for me, for instance, whenever I put in a prompt for AI, I make it ask me two things. Number one, I make it ask me the role it should take, because AI can be really helpful as well. So if you say to AI, I want you to be a sales expert in selling services and roofs, right? And now help me do a sales script.
Right.
It will actually take on the persona of a sales expert, right? And the other piece of that, the second thing I do is I always ask. I've trained AI in this personalization piece, which is really quick, to always ask me 5 follow-up questions to get clarity. Because what happens is with AI, right, is AI is just like me and you talking. And so if you ask me a question, I could answer you. Or what I find helpful, just to get to like the crux of what I need, is ask me 5 questions that you need to know, because I'm not going to be able to tell you everything. I'm not going to remember everything to say, right? I think AI is an interesting thing. The reason why I do that is because AI itself is a lot of us have to rethink how we learn and how we think, because we are working with something like a technology that has all the answers, but the more you give it, the more you're going to get out of it, right? And so when you think about AI working, it's really about how you would want to work with your customer or your client. So you think about like you're the best, like for me, the best sales experience I've ever had are the ones where, whether it's roofers or whether it's like the closet people, is when they come in, it's getting to the why of why I want things, right? It's asking the questions that are going to get drilled down. I remember when we had our closet done, my wife wanted a bunch of things, and the guy was asking about like shoes, and she's like, oh yeah, of course I want places for boots. And then he was like, how many boots do you have? And it's like, do you have boots for different seasons? I was like, this dude's crazy. But then when they built the thing, I was like, oh, okay. Because if you would have just gone with, she has a lot of shoes, she would have been disappointed. Right? Because it would have been like, you told me you had a lot of shoes. I built you a lot of shoes. Well, doesn't fit my shoes. But these, the sales guys who are good, and this is what you want AI to be, is to be really thoughtful and inquisitive, to say, okay, so for this experience to be really good, I don't just need to know how many shoes, but I need to know like how tall your boots are and how many boots you have, and like how you even put your clothes on in your closet, because having things in different areas is actually going to make it more efficient or less efficient.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think you have touched on a few really important pieces that I haven't even thought about. Is give me 5 questions that you wouldn't even think about. And one of the things that we deal with a lot with our customers is when you pitch the initial sale, try to get the initial sale, they may not have questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Meaning they may only have questions on maybe the color of the shingle or the timeline it could get done, right? But then as you progress with that sale, a few days from now, maybe a week from now, after they sign the contract,
Mm-hmm.
more questions come up. Well, if you can answer those questions before, a week or two later, and they start asking more and more questions, if you can answer those initial questions on the initial pitch of the
Yeah.
sale, one, it's going to make your life easier. Two, it's going to show your expertise. Because really, I think that is, to me, the most important aspect of selling is showing your expertise.
Yeah.
And a lot of the expertise is there for, like, we wouldn't hire someone who doesn't have the expertise in exterior modeling, or at least have the potential to learn and become an expert in exterior modeling.
Mm-hmm.
But the flaw is showing your knowledge to the customer, because they don't know that you're the expert. They think you're the expert. They hope you're the expert, but they don't know. And it can get overwhelming because there's a lot of information.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you've sparked my interest here that ChatGPT can, again, predict, right? There's a predicting aspect to AI that you can use for your benefit. Before we get off, because we're starting to get close to the end of the podcast, where do you think the prediction aspect of the AI is beneficial, and how can you use that to help your sales team? I mean, you've already talked a lot about it, but where do you start? Because I think that is, at least I have an initial question with that. I'm sure other people will have questions about that. Where do you start to even get it to help you with the prediction aspect of a customer may want, what you can what you can expect as a salesman or whatever you may be?
Yeah, it's a great question. So
It's accurate. That how do you know that's going to be accurate?
yeah, okay. So the accuracy, that's a whole other thing. So you mentioned the predictive nature, right? So I think that's a critical piece. Let's go back again to just what AI is and how it works, right? So AI essentially is the ability to program computers to mimic human behavior, right? And so with AI specifically, again, ChatGPT, Claude, because I think AI has become like synonymous with ChatGPT, but AI is so much bigger, right, than that. But just in the context of this conversation around just the large language models, AI has basically been trained to consume all of the data in the world of the internet, right? And so it predicts answers from what it's been trained on, right? So, so I think the way I always put it is that AI knows everything, but it knows nothing, because AI knows everything that's ever been said, whether it's a blog or a Reddit, right? Or any social media post, and that kind of goes back into full circle the previous point, which was like, social media and the reliability of social media or media in general, and news and people posting stuff that say is real, right? So AI knows those things. And actually, I saw this really crazy post the other day, where someone made up a cookie type, and then they basically went in and started like feeding it to ChatGPT, and over a period of time, like the cookie started coming up as like a type of cookie.
Oh my gosh!
But it's real, right? Because it's training itself. It's learning, right? It's learning about things, and it doesn't know what's real and doesn't know what's not real. It just knows that it's being said. So it's predictive, right? And so what happens is when you get into the sales piece of it, right, it's taking, every single sales piece from every single sales guy, out there who's writing something about how to sell, to every roofer who's writing about how to sell, to the guys who you pay to teach you how to sell, right? That's what it's trying to get from. And so the idea, right, as you use it as a human, is you need to make sure that you, number one, are always in control of your AI, and number two, you are responsible for what your AI puts out. And so that means that as a human, so that's why it's still important to have experts. So it's important to have, sales experts who know how to sell, because that's what's going to get the most out of AI. It's important to have a CPA or a lawyer if you need them, because you can ask AI a question on how to save, time, save money on your taxes, but I mean, it only knows what it's reading everywhere else. It doesn't actually know, right? It's not any better than like using TurboTax, let's say. It's not an expert in the field. So what you want to do essentially is, if you think about the large language model as this huge like blob of data, right? So it's all the data in the world, but it knows nothing. What you need to do is you need to start to train it by feeding it the truth of that, to help refine and retrain it. So it's kind of the opposite, right? When you think about a child knows nothing, but it's learning as it goes, right? AI is the opposite. AI knows everything, and you got to kind of pare it down, right? And so what happens is in your AI, your license, your ChatGPT, your Claude, Notebook LM, whatever you're using for that kind of business to consumer experience, or even a B2B experience, the more you use it, the more it learns about you, and the more it starts to pick up on, like you said, predicting what you would say, because it starts to train and refine itself to, oh, my Matt Luterman, my user, this is what Matt Luterman does. This is what he asked about, right? And it starts to really understand you from all the different requests that you've ever given it across your account, right? So if you're using it for roofing, but using it for vacation planning, right? ChatGPT now has a function where you can start to not share, or ChatGPT won't learn across conversations, right? Because if you have a business and you're running a business and using ChatGPT, but you're also putting personal stuff in, like you don't want it to basically consolidate those ideas, right? Even though they're in your own brain. So what you want to do is train the AI to essentially what I would call refining it down to what the realities are, right? And that would mean, like I said, is being able to give it all the context in the world. So for instance, starting with the content itself, right? So, your website information, who you are, your LinkedIn, like whatever you are, whatever your business is, right? Because it has to get the core of what you are, and you have to validate that. If you typed in right now, like who is Matt Luterman, right? I do Michael Bresler. Who's Michael Bresler? Like there's a bunch of Michael Breslers. There's a Stanford doctor, Michael Bresler. So it's like, oh, Michael does this and he's a doctor. It's like, no, I'm more than one person. I'm just me, right? So you have to kind of refine that down. And then once you start to use it, it's giving that feedback of what your truth is. Now, context is also really important. So if you have like a sales document that you like saw online that you love, or you went to a sales class and they gave you a document and like, oh, this is really good, uploading that document into your AI to be able to use it as context, being able to say either this was a great customer journey that I loved, let's kind of use this as a framework, or this is a great example of a customer sales experience that I love. Let's use that as an example. So the idea really, the short answer is you've got to recognize that AI is everything or knows everything, but it doesn't mean that everything it knows is real or true to you. And so you need to essentially help it refine down so that it becomes more relevant and resembles you as what you're trying to accomplish, right? So the CR3, so your AI for CR3 like really is like, oh, it's like a CR3 employee, and it knows it thinks CR3, and like for a salesperson as well. So it like thinks the way CR3 would think, right? Meaning like you have a certain way of how you're communicating, how you're building relationships, right? That's something that you would train with a human. It's no different than training with your AI. Because a sales guy that comes in from a different organization, they might be very transactional, whereas CR3 is very relational. That's a different conversation. So that person has to be retrained to say, like, don't just jump into business, talk about like their kids. I mean, you walk into the house, say, oh, that's so great. Your son is graduating from high school. Amazing. Well, I went to the school down the street, right? Like, make it personal. They'll just walk in and do business. But the transactional sales training is going to be a little different than that. And that's what AI is, right? So AI has all those trainings, and our job is to using our expertise to help it refine down to something that resembles what we want. And that's why it's important that, like I said, I think I'll leave it with AI is only as good as the person using it.
So just to end and wrap this up, something on a fun note, I just typed in, who is Matt Luterman? And still ChatGPT stated I'm still a college baseball player.
Okay.
And I'm a full-time podcaster. So the two things I'd love to be in my life, but that's my, half of that's my previous life. But Michael, that was a great conversation. It's always a pleasure having you come on, and obviously we're gonna have a lot more great conversations coming up in the future. The Entrepreneurial Blueprint podcast is back, so tune in every week. Again, we're gonna have Michael on a lot. We're gonna have some other great guests. We're gonna have Lester on hosting too. So tune in, share, like, comment, and let's keep this ball rolling, Michael.
Good. I appreciate it. Good talking to you again.
Likewise.